Welcome to Halal Money Matters, presented by Saturna Capital. I'm Christopher Patton.
And I'm Monim Salam.
Our topic today is an interesting one that I didn't know a ton about.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you find some people who are super, super productive. They always find time to be able to do like 10,000 different things. And so those people like that. And other people are like, you know what, I can only get one thing done a day.
Yeah.
And so I think this episode, it speaks to a little bit of that and how you put barakah into your time and your money.
So not just looking at how to become a more productive individual, but what are the religious benefits of taking that kind of like a scientific approach to maximizing your productivity?
Yeah, and we have a great guest today. His name is Mohammed Faris. He's the founder and chief productive officer for the Productive Muslim Company. Funny, I've known him for a few years, and initially he'll talk about this also, but he started off just doing this on the side, then it became a company, and now he speaks around the country at large companies, small companies, talking about this, becoming more productive.
I watched some of his talks online. He did a TED talk about this. It's super interesting. I'm excited to speak with him.
Mohammed, thank you for joining. I think this is a very important topic, and what we wanted to discuss was a little bit about being productive from an overall your life perspective, but we're really because this is a Halal Money Matters podcast, kind of really talking about how a Muslim and especially our shareholders, which are primarily Muslim, can be productive in their financial life as well. But before we get into that, I think Chris had a couple of good introductory questions, so we'll start there, and then we'll go on.
So I saw you kind of self-identify as a productivity geek in college, and I'm curious what drove that. One, and two, was your interest in productivity, was it always through a faith lens, or did those associations kind of come later on?
Yeah, great questions. So Bismillah. So I think, started off, what got me to productivity was me being in college and being involved in a lot of stuff. I had 2 part-time jobs. I was doing a master's degree, and I was involved in the community, and I felt busy. I felt overwhelmed, busy, stressed out. I'm like, man, I'm just a rinky-dinky student, and here I am really being stressed out about how to manage all this stuff. What would happen in 5-10 years if I get married, have kids, and if I get involved with work? So I really felt like I need to figure this out. And one of the best advice I ever got when one of my flatmate was like, if you ever face a problem, someone somewhere wrote a book about it. I'm like, that's great. So I'm sure there's something out there. And that's when I kind of stumbled on this whole genre of getting things done and productivity and how to become more efficient. And also I was a bit of an Apple boy, Mac geek also. So I was doing all the softwares to kind of fly through my emails and just trying to get anything that will get me more efficient, more productive. So that's when I started stumbling the whole science of productivity, mainly from just that getting things done, life hacking. I was loved lifehacker.com, Engadget, all those blogs that talk about just how to get more efficient. It's only when I started the blog, I actually started it as me share what I'm learning. So I was kind of taking all of the knowledge, getting all these books and websites, and just sharing with my Muslim community, because a lot of my friends say, hey, how do you do it? And how do you balance everything else? Let me just write a blog about it. I was into writing, wanted to start a blog for a long time. That was 2007, everyone started a blog, right? But it's only a year later, after kind of blogging for a while, that I started sort of started asking the question, wait a second, this whole productivity thing seems so cool, amazing, and makes my life better. Where in my faith, and for me, I felt like Islam offers us a complete way of life. Where in Islam talks about productivity? I don't hear imams and scholars talk about productivity as a concept. But you don't hear it from the Friday sermons, or if you don't hear it from normal lectures. And that's when I started sort of kind of putting the productivity hat on and kind of rereading verses in the Quran and sayings from Muhammad, peace be upon him, and realizing, wait a second, there's all this productivity stuff going on here that I've just never thought of it that way. And that's when the whole kind of new approach with faith-based approach took off, basically.
So what was your first either hadith or Quranic verse that you came across? And sometimes what happens is you read verses over and over again, and then you read it for the 15th time, and you're like, oh my God, oh wow, but this is crazy. I've never even thought of it this way. So what was your first verse that was like that?
I think it was a hadith actually. It was the hadith that says, Allah put barakah in my ummah, my nation, in the early hours. And it's not the hadith itself, it's the commentary of the hadith. So they say the companion, his name was Sakhar al-Ghamidi, who heard this hadith, when he heard this saying, Muhammad, he started sending his trade early in the morning, started going to the market early in the morning, and became very wealthy as a result. If you just read that hadith at face value, okay, the Prophet's making dua, he's praying for you to have some kind of barakah in the early hours. Oh, that's nice. But this man was very smart. Realized, wait a second, that's a secret to basically becoming productive financially and basically to grow his wealth. So he started sending his trade and sending his sort of goods in the market early in the morning. And the funny thing is, because every productivity book I was reading up until that point talks about wake up early, right? If you want to be productive, you got to wake up early. And that's when I realized, wait a second, here's the hadith that tells us kind of the secret of why we should wake up early, which is the idea of barakah, which is something that we talk a lot about, Barakah Muslim. And it's so important about this idea of tapping into this divine goodness, this special times, special places with this mubarakah that really helps you become a better version of yourself and also helps bring blessings upon blessings that you don't even expect, basically.
I'm trying to think about your career also, because you did finance and economics and then went into Islamic Development Bank right away. So now I'm thinking about it saying, was it that your lens that hit you on that hadith first? Or because of your finance background, or maybe would have been, if you were a biology major, would you have hit up on another hadith on productivity?
That's true. Yeah, maybe I was definitely finance also geek a little bit. I was finance student for bachelor's, masters, and I was recognized. And it wasn't, and the funny thing wasn't from perspective of, oh, let me just find out the secrets of becoming a millionaire when I'm 25, right? It was more about just recognizing that there's something in the early hours that all the productivity geeks that I'm reading about talk about. They can't pinpoint why. And I was like, here is almost like a clear explanation of what it is about this. What's the secret of the early morning hours that brings that, you wake up in the morning, you get so much done compared to, let's say, late in the day. That's barakah, that's being productive in a very holistic sense as well.
So why is it?
I think for us, so the way I define productivity is to be also, I try to avoid the kind of industry-based definition, but output over input, right? That's normal productivity definition. For me, it's about how do you manage your energy, focus, and time, right? How do you manage energy, focus, and time to be a better version of yourself, to fulfill your purpose in life? And this idea of barakah, what happens, barakah is, I feel, is like a secret sauce. It's a divine sort of secret that enters your energy, your focus, your time, your wealth, your children, anything, right? The idea of barakah, definition of barakah means it can enter anything. And there's almost an unexplained increase that happens, unexplained growth, but it's not even almost like logical, but it's there. And that's the idea. In this way, they say barakah is where the divine world meets the human world. And as we experience it, for example, when you wake up early, for example, when you give charity, we also see it when, for example, you invite friends over, and let's say you invited like 10 people over, and they decided to bring all their friends, and like 20 people show up at your house, and somehow there's enough food, even though you cook just for 10 people, somehow there's enough food. That's barakah, right? There's some unexplained growth that happens. So we've all experienced some parts of barakah, but for me, like that is kind of like what I feel like that's the, if we can tap into, yes, you can improve your efficiency and productivity, you can learn all these life hacks, but what's more important for us to become more productive is to tap into this divine blessing called barakah by, aligning our mindsets, our values and rituals to attract the barakah in our lives, basically.
At what point did you decide to kind of pivot your career to pinpointing this idea?
Yeah, I think it was 2008. So I started the blog 2007. By 2011, when I started getting invited to do training and workshops, and then I got a book deal to write a book about it, realized, okay, this is getting a little bit, serious. And at one point in 2015, I had to make a decision. Like either I shut the website down and just, focus on my career as an Islamic banker, for a risk manager to be specific, or do I just jump into this full speed ahead and just see how far I can go with it? And honestly, the answer to me was pretty clear. Just that this was more meaningful to me, even though I enjoyed working in the Islamic finance industry. I enjoyed working at the Islamic Development Bank. I had a lot of sort of, great colleagues and friends, and the way I just enjoyed the work. But I felt this was more meaningful for me. Hence, I went straight in 2016. Is when I moved ahead, full speed ahead.
So now talking a little bit about this idea, because I think you're right. There is this kind of unexplained phenomenon, and we see a lot of clients in our everyday lives and shareholders of the funds and those type of things, and there's certain things that I tell people, and they ask me why, and I'm like, I don't know. That's what it is. Like one of the biggest one I've realized is like having credit card debt. Once you basically pay off, like I've told people before, once you pay it off, you're going to find so much more, blessing. And part of the blessing is what I find is that like when you have blessings, you know where your money is going. and you have, no matter what happens, you'll have money left over at the end of the day. Whereas if you don't, you earn it, it spends, and you're like, what just happened? I have no idea where the money went, but it's just disappearing. Those type of things. It's unexplained phenomenon that happens.
I mean, and it's because it's unexplained, it's real, right? The challenge for us, of course, is how to explain it. It's a real phenomenon. We firmly believe in it as part of our faith. This idea of barakah, it is traditionally has been spoken about. When you hear merchants in the souk, right? You go to any traditional souk, for example, in Istanbul or Cairo, Morocco, till today, this whole idea of, the first trade, early in the mornings, you go in the market, they'll open up their shops. There's things like, for example, the idea of don't buy from me, buy from my brother. We think that's historic, that's still today. So they understood where it might not make competition sense or logical sense. One of my favorite stories is, I don't know if you know Al Baik, right? The famous fried chicken company in Jeddah. This business owner, Al Baik, name is Shakur Ghazala, started off this fried chicken restaurant in Jeddah in 1976. And he died 2 years later. Right? He never saw the success of his business. But when he started his business, even though the first 2 years were terrible, he was losing money. Imagine a business losing money. He decided to give $1 in charity for every fried chicken he sold. Now you think that does not make any business sense. Bring in a BCG, McKinsey, right? And tell them, hey, I have a CSR program on a business that's losing money. Like, what are you doing? Like, make profit first, then you can,
Sure.
give away some money, especially for tax purposes, right? But this guy's like, no, I'm going to start from day one. And even though he passed away, and then when his kids took over, it's fascinating that this became one of the most beloved fried chicken brands in Middle East. And so that the fact that 20 years later, the Saudi government sort of chose Al Baik to be one of the prime real estate to serve fried chicken to millions of pilgrims, right? And I'm thinking, what is it? Like, there's KFC, there's all the fried chicken companies, why Al Baik specifically? And this idea of barakah, right? Sometimes it's the impact. Even if you don't see that impact in your own lifetime, in the case of Shakur, he never saw the impact of his own lifetime. He made the right decisions. He had the right values. He tapped in the right rituals. He knew there's something bigger than himself and his business, and the purpose of business is to serve. And that, for me, is fascinating. And that's something that I feel we've lost, and we kind of don't talk about. We think about very logical, number crunching lives, but I think it's important to put barakah as part of your calculation whenever you think of your finances or your wealth or any parts of your life, basically.
It's interesting. You mentioned the thing about the marketplace, and I remember. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was you, but I remember somebody mentioning that in the marketplace, and maybe this still happens when the merchants come out and there's one person selling, like let's say 20 people selling the same thing. When they've made their sustenance for the day, they'll just wrap up and go home. Like there's no idea of marginal increases in their businesses, and I just found that to be really amazing. Like it's such a different concept than get as much as you can at the expense of other people.
Much. Absolutely. My grandfather used to run, he has a shop in Dar es Salaam, passed a couple of years ago, but I remember going to his shop, growing up in the summer in his shop and just seeing how he traded as business. And like I say, it's just so relaxed, honestly. It's like people pass by and he'll give them money. I'm like, who's that person? Like, oh, no, he just comes and collects his money. I'm like, do you owe him anything? No. That's like, it was competition, of course, not, there's no, it's almost like, holding hands and just sing kumbaya. There's competition, but you can see it's not that cutthroat competition where it's trying to put you down. And to the point where if someone's business fails, they'll kind of chip in and kind of support that person in any way, shape or form. So this constant, again, and it comes down to, I would say, to mindsets, values, and rituals, how the way you think about business and money and how you approach life, the values you hold, and rituals you kind of sort of choose to practice. And those things bring this barakah in your life beyond imagination, right? Whether it's in your health, whether it's in your children, whether it's in your home, whether it's in your car, whether it's your laptop or smartphone, or your business. I think we really need to start tapping more into this whole idea as part of being quote unquote productive beyond in a spiritual sense, and also a real sense as well.
So let's break that down a little bit. So you said mindset, values, and rituals, right? So kind of let's look at each of these and kind of define.
Yeah. So first of all, why I come up with these three terms is there was a research done in the University of Vienna. Actually, there's Dr. Ali Gubzawi. He wrote an article, a journal paper on why we should embrace religions in moral theories of leadership, in leadership theories, basically. And he said that if you think about religion, what religion brings to the table is that when someone subscribes to a religion, they have three main distinctive features. Number one, they believe in a deity, right? They believe in a God, in a deity, something beyond themselves. Number two, they believe in some kind of life after death. So ultimate accountability, if you can put it that way. And number three, they believe in some kind of sacred scriptures, some kind of guidelines how to live your life, right? So believe in a deity, believe in sacred scriptures, believe in life after death, and believe in sacred scriptures. And if someone comes with that, and when you do your coaching, we talk about things like mental models, right? People come with their own mental models, the worldview. If someone comes with that worldview where they believe in a deity, they believe in life after death, and they believe in sacred scriptures, that will inform their mindsets. The mindset means how they think, the way they think. For example, the mindset of being God conscious, right? Being really conscious that God is watching over you in every small and big detail. The mindset of being abundance mindset. Like we said, there's enough for everybody. I don't have to cut through. I don't have to cut. You don't have to lose for me to win. We can both win. That's an abundance mindset that comes from believing that God sustains me versus, I got to make sure get every bit of money out of you, so to speak. And then that's the mindsets. Values is more what we believe in, which is kind of like what are almost like the mark, for example, the value of mercy, the value of justice, the value of, and we see in today's society where people are calling for these values. There's a great quote by the head of MBA graduate schools in Western Europe. She said that we've done a great job of graduating effective leaders, but we did a terrible job of graduating ethical leaders, right? And this idea of ethics, but how do you teach ethics? Something like amana, trustworthiness, right? Honesty. Like, how do you teach? These are things you grew up with. These are stories you grew up with. These are more like, these are values that instilled in you either by society or by parents or by school system, or these are values that are important to kind of, you think about and kind of live up to. And find rituals. Rituals are the lifestyle choices, including prayers and fasting and those more traditional worship rituals, but even things like helping people, volunteering. So that's where the sort of model came up with. If you tap into these mindsets, values, and rituals, it can really, basically living this lifestyle where you're conscious, the way you think, what you believe in, and your lifestyle choices. This attracts this divine goodness, this barakah, which enters and permeates all aspects of your life, basically.
It's interesting, like on our show, we spend a lot of time breaking down Islamic finance, and you see that a lot of the components are kind of just common sense things that could be applicable to anyone. So when you say mindset, values, and rituals, that could apply to anybody. Those are just good ways to live your life.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about this, that sometimes, when you might have these mindset, values, and rituals, and you might sort of, yep, I agree with them, but how sincere you are subscribing to them, right? That's where the market comes. A lot of people say, yes, I believe in justice, I believe in abundance mindset. It makes sense, right? Yeah. But when it comes to when the rubber hits the road, right? When you are in a situation where your personal interest perhaps collides with all these mindsets, value, and rituals, do you go the extra mile and say, no, because I believe in a deity, because I believe in a hereafter, because I believe in sacred scriptures, I'm going to make that sacrifice, even though it does not make sense. Like the example of the fried chicken story, right? Even if it doesn't make sense, that's where the difficulty is. And I think that's why spirituality and religion in general come and give you that organized system to kind of like help you and to be sincere and to kind of commit to those mindset, values, and rituals, even if you feel like, oh, I'm not so sure about this. I'm not sure this is going. And I think that's our challenge, and that's what I feel like what spirituality and religion brings to the table when it comes to this concept, basically.
So now coming a little bit more now into let's say the U.S. versus maybe the rest of the world. I mean, we're as Muslims living in America, we're basically caught up in the hustle and bustle, right, of every day. So how do you kind of begin to balance? How do you make, for example, what you said about mindset, values, and rituals? From a you can put it into an Islamic context, and I would say, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. But then how do I translate that into my non-Muslim boss?
Yeah, love that. I mean, I did present this concept. I call it Barakah culture versus hustle culture, right? And I made this presentation. I did this in Salesforce, American Airlines, Google, and I presented to a Muslim and non-Muslim crowd, and people get it. And the way I define it, so there's right now, if you think about productivity in the sort of 21st century model, it's the hustle culture model, right? You got to hustle. If you're not hustling, then you're a loser. The whole Gary V, right, approach to life and hustle, which kind of sometimes, it's only going up. It only can take you up so far. We've seen what happened in COVID, right? Whenever it just kind of slow down, realize, wait a second, if people don't want to go back to that hustle lifestyle, like we don't want to go back to that where we lose value of families and lose ourselves and become so obsessed with work, where work becomes almost like a religion. There's a great article in The Atlantic, a guy called Derek Thompson, he wrote an article saying why workism is making Americans miserable. And the idea that it defines workism, where work has become the central piece of identity. Work has actually replaced religion because it gives us meaning and purpose. It gives us a sense of community, and it became like almost like the definition. You think about it, from when you're young, from school to college, you've been taught that follow your passion, follow your dream. Like you grew up into this kind of like, I know this arc of become the next Elon Musk or next Jeff Bezos, right? That's the narrative. And the narrative is that you got to hustle. If you want to get there, you got to hustle. But the alarm bells are sounding now. I mean, the co-founder of Reddit wrote about, and excuse the term, hustle pornography. Basically, people are so obsessed with, getting, hustling, wake up 4 a.m, go and hit the gym, check my email before breakfast, all that stuff. With like, where are you taking the anxiety, the depression, the suicide? Unfortunately, we see in our society because it's just a treadmill that is, it gets to you, right? So when I present this, like the challenge hustle culture is very egocentric. It's about me, myself, and I. It's very materialistic in a sense, where materialism. There's a great book finished reading yesterday called The High Price of Materialism by Professor Tim Kaser. Great book, talks about how, well, if your orientation of life is simply wealth and possession, if that's what your purpose in life, what you aim for, the research, I mean, he's done a lot of research and studies. It's just depressing. You feel less connected, you feel less happy, physical, psychological well-being. So there's that side of it. And then finally, so egocentric, materialistic focused, and very sort of here and now versus thinking about, what you offer to the world, those generations to come. And what I'm proposing, I talk about the idea of Barakah culture, a culture that is more God-centric. And the reason why I put God in the center, people feel uncomfortable in a secular society, like, what about God? I'm like, that's the only way for you to get out of yourself, because otherwise you'll be trapped into some other deity. Whether if it's not yourself, you will worship some kind of celebrity, you worship money, you worship something else. Only when you let go of that and connect to a deity, to get to God himself, that's when you can really be free, basically. That's number one. Number two, hereafter focus, recognizing that there's a really long-term game, right? Stephen Covey talks about beginning with the end in mind. I said begin with the very end in mind, right? When you think about that end, like after death. And finally, about purpose and impact drive, focusing on purpose and impact. That is where we need to make this shift. Now, whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe in Islam or not, even if you just move away from being egocentric to realize that there must be a way different way of living, a way that's beyond myself, a way that's more about purpose and impact. That's important, because the way we are taught or driven to be productive is just not sustainable. And unfortunately, our families, our children, and society is paying the price for that approach of productivity, basically.
It kind of reminds me of something in one of your talks. You mentioned contentment as a source of barakah, and that it's okay to be ambitious and work for things, but to kind of just going back to the mindset, to try to maintain that. To me, that's kind of beautiful, because it emphasizes gratitude along the way through your journey.
Yeah, enjoy the ride, right? Enjoy the ride. And again, in hustle culture, it's always like, what's next, right? You hit the $1 million, I need a 10 million, hit the 10 million, I need a billion, versus being content. And you're right. It's not saying don't be ambitious. And people sometimes I get backlash. Some people say, oh, well, aren't you encouraging laziness? Aren't you encouraging people to, isn't this the problem with the Muslim world today? They're too much into Barakah culture. They're not doing much, right? And I'm like, no. I mean, again, that's at the extreme. The extreme of just like, chill out, do nothing, versus going all out and killing yourself. I'm like, there's a balance here, guys. Let's just aim for the balance. Otherwise, it's not sustainable for either side.
And I think Chris, you mentioned about contentment, and Mohammed, you can probably kind of find the source for this, but I think it was like contentment is a treasure that has no bounds. I can't remember who that was.
Actually, it's funny because in this book, Tim Kaser, in the final chapter, he actually mentions Prophet Muhammad hadith that says, wealth is not having many possessions, but rather true wealth is feeling contentment in your soul, right? And he actually mentions that, and he actually wrote in the paragraph, because this whole book, I've been trying to prove this statement. And this guy's not a Muslim. He just found this saying, he goes, this is what it is. Wealth is not about having a lot of stuff. wealth is content in the soul. Just think about it. I mean, I always remember, like, I don't know, you guys grew up as a student when you're in college, right? And you didn't have much, right? You grew up in college, you're rich, you don't have much, but you're happy. You just go out and do stuff. And then suddenly, you know, when wealth becomes the main focus, you feel it's never enough. And you're like, wait, what's happening? I remember before we're like, man, if I only had like $1,000 in my account, I'll be so happy. And then you move on. If I only had 5,000, only 10,000, now it's only 100. Where does it end, right? Unless you're content in your soul. And where does contentment comes from? It comes from, again, these mindsets, those values, rituals that you have to train yourself and discipline yourself, as well as be proactive about. You don't just kind of sit on a mount, expect content to hit you. You have to kind of practice and kind of hold yourself accountable. If you find yourself, hey, don't get, be content. You have enough. Yes, you want more. That's fine, but don't, enjoy the ride, as Chris mentioned.
So, it's interesting. So, and looking at it from a non-investment perspective, it's a lot about, how do we eke out that extra marginal rate of return above the benchmark? And people come up with their spreadsheets, and they're like, when do I retire, and do I need this, and how much do I save, and all of those things that are there, and that's important. But maybe we can talk a little bit about, is there where's that limit, or where is it something that's productive? And where does it become an obsession?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. I mean, I'm in that stage of life now, right? I've got 3 kids. I'm thinking of having that conversation with my accountant, right, about retirement and school and college. And yes, you set up the plan, set up the accounts. You're there. You're trying to work towards them. But like you said, where you draw the line between you? For me, the model is Prophet Yusuf, right? Prophet Yusuf, when he interpreted the dream of the king, saying that you'll have 7 good years and 7 famine years, and you basically, during the good years, make sure you save for the bad years, right? So he was and that would make a great economic decision, saying we need to save during the good years, so the bad years. And that's inspiration about budgeting, about making sure you save something for rainy days, all that stuff, which is great. And also reinvesting and so on and so forth. When it comes, I guess, to the question, when it comes to obsession, is when every morning you get up. For example, one thing I've done, which helped me a lot, is I've deleted all these apps on my phone where you can check your portfolio, right? Just deleted the apps, because otherwise you just get up and first thing you do, like, oh, how's it doing today? And it becomes an obsession. So again, this whole, they tell you, our scholars talk about don't let wealth enter your heart. Another thing which I've found is to really kind of push yourself to give and give and give as much as possible. Like to really train yourself, even when you feel like it's not enough, right? They say the most beloved charity is when you give, even when you fear poverty, right? Like, for example, I could say, oh my God, yeah, but I've saved this amount of money for my retirement, but there's a really good cause that I need to push myself a bit and give and have that mindset. I'm not saying throw your retirement money into a cause, but it's kind of training yourself. Again, back to the idea of disciplining yourself and disciplining your soul. These are the tests you got to ask yourself. Am I willing to give, knowing and believing that there's barakah in this, or there's goodness in this? That's when you know that you're not obsessed, that you know that you have that balance between preparing, but at the same time, you have the right mindset, values, ritual to know that sometimes you need to perhaps go against a bit of a logic and just do give for the sake of giving and the sake of God, basically.
So that's interesting you actually bring that up, because if you take the opposite approach, which is, I need to be able to make as much money as possible, even my portfolio, so that the more money I make, the more zakat I can give. Because I've heard people saying that. So it's
a practice.
It's a practice, right? So, I mean, yes, at $1 million, that 1% extra that you make is going to be $10,000 more in zakat that you can give. Should I not maximize my portfolio to be able to be optimum rather than not?
One of the scholars told me, the actual teacher told me this, Jeff, and he said, you need to, don't say I'm going to have $1 million to give. He said, get in the habit of giving and giving generously based wherever you want to stage. If you're the rinky-dinky student who only has like $500 in his account, or even $100 in the account, give, at that level, whatever that amount is reasonable for you. If you're the millionaire, give at that level. So it's almost like the act of giving should not be dependent on how much is in bank account. It's more like, I'm going to give because I want to develop the practice as a way of purifying your heart, purifying yourself, purifying your wealth. You need to give. Yes, zakah is the bare minimum, but at least go above and beyond that. So I would say, you might think my intention is good, right? My intention is I want to maximize my portfolio so that I can give really generously. But I'm saying, don't wait till that happens. Give while you try to maximize. This should not be too, don't like, I'm going to wait 5 years till I maximize, then I'm going to give. No, give now and you'll see the barakah that comes in your wealth inshallah as you grow.
That's interesting. I have always told my kids, because when in their summer jobs and those type of things, to break your income into three, right? It's 1/3 charity, 1/3 savings, 1/3 you can spend. And sometimes somebody told me, well, that's not sustainable in the long run. I'm like, you're right, but they're not paying for rent and not paying for food. So once they get to that, it might not be 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but at least they'll be every paycheck, they'll have a habit of doing something with that mindset of having three different goals, right? One is on yourself, one is on savings, and one is on spending it on charity. So hopefully it works for them. I don't know. I've been trying
and also the thing is, sometimes there are certain, like I said, there's sometimes these barakah investments, I call them, right? These charities or small things you do when you're young or at early age, they come pay you back years later, right? It's not immediate ROI. It's like, oh, I get $5 now, I'm gonna get $5 in the mail next mailing. Sometimes you make these small things over, you might feel the barakah, whether maybe perhaps in their education, maybe in their grade, maybe in the type of friends who surround them, right? We don't know how barakah manifests itself. Barakah is like this blessing that comes where you don't expect. It could be a great set of friends, a great mentor they bump into, inshallah, long life for their parents. Like, there's so many other ways that they can experience barakah because of the act of giving. This is a good act that I know I'm not losing, right? I'm not losing this game. Once the Prophet, peace be upon him, he went home, and because there was someone donated a piece of sort of meat, lamb, I think, for dinner for Prophet, peace be upon him, and his wife she donated all of it, most of it away. She gave most of it away except for the shoulder, which was the part the Prophet used to like to eat. And then so the Prophet asked his wife how much of the lamb was left. And she said, we gave away all of it except for the shoulder. And then he said, no. We've actually spent the shoulder, because shoulder will just go in our stomach. That part of meat will go in our stomach and go away. But that one we donated, that's for us forever, right? That's the investment in our hereafter. That is for us forever. So if you think that way, that I'm giving, I'm not losing money, but I'm actually almost like putting in a bank account that brings back this ROI, which I cannot even fathom. It opens a whole different worldview, which is, I feel, very healthy when it comes to wealth management and how you run your finances, instead of being that myopic, a spreadsheet 1 + 1 = 2, so to speak, basically.
In your speeches that you've given and other places and seminars you've given, what is a common thread when it comes to finance and investments that people keep questioning over and over again? What would be the most common?
Yeah, a lot of it, again, when it comes to Saudi Barakah, a lot of people struggle, right, to make that leap between, yes, I understand, I believe in idea of Barakah. I believe that if I invest in halal investments, if I, make sure that if I follow my faith values when it comes to how I manage my money, if I do give in charity, I believe that there's an ROI, but I can't make logical sense of it. And this is where that leap of faith is needed. When you are sort of trained in a specific worldview to kind of switch worldviews, even though you believe in that second worldview, you just haven't experienced it. So you need more of that experiences, and that's kind of the biggest one that comes up.
And how do you advise them to make that jump?
That's a good question. It's, again, Barakah is experiential. It's not something you can teach. And it's not something you also test. People are like, God forbid, use the term like test God. Oh, let's see what happens, right? It's something you got to go both feet in, and you might not see the ROI in the way you expect it to see. I'm gonna put it that way, because sometimes you think, oh, but wait, I lost my investment, or I didn't actually make as much money as I thought I would. But you might say, well, maybe you didn't see Barakah there. I will say that the way you measure Barakah is 3 ways. One is, of course, some increase of growth, but sometimes just stability. Right? If you have stability, think about it. We went through a COVID year. If you have stability in your income, stability in your financial wealth, that's barakah, right? We think about all the people lost their jobs and lost their investments, or the business collapsed. The fact that you have stability, that's a form of barakah. And finally, is continuity, right? The fact that something continues for a long period of time. For example, let's say you have a small project, a small business that keeps on, that keeps bringing some return, or something small that keeps on going. Continue is also a form of barakah. When we interviewed Dr. Mohammed Ali, the president of ISTB, the previous president, he was president for 40 years. And we asked him, what surprised the most of leading IDB for 40 years? He goes, the fact it continued. He goes, he never expected that bank to last. He said the fact it continued, I'm surprised by that, right? I'm not sure the good thing or bad thing, but he was quite surprised by that. But that's for him, that's the form of barakah basically. So it's you make that leap by going to jump in and then realizing that you are not losing in this game. There'll be see benefit maybe beyond the way you think, how you expect that benefit. And that's I think that's faith. That's where faith comes in, right? It's one of those things where you got to take that leap with that faith mindset, basically.
You offered up one definition during one of your talks that was from a scholar and a linguist, and I wrote it down because I want to just offer it here, because when I heard you say it, to me, it was very easy to apply this idea to finance to me. And that is that barakah is the attachment of divine goodness to a thing that if it occurs in something little, it increases it. And if it occurs in something abundant, it further increases the benefit. And to me, that really stresses that whatever level you're at, you can do something and it has meaning.
Beautiful. Love that. Yeah, that's from Imam Raghib Asfahani. He's a linguist, and he got probably the most succinct definition, because whenever I always look for the definition of barakah and I get all over the place, right? But it's very succinct, very clear. And for me, there's 4 parts. One is it's divine blessing. So it means it's not from another person. It comes from God. It's a divine blessing. Number 2, it attaches itself to something. Now, what is that thing? I said, your wealth, your health, your children, your apartment, your laptop, your 1986 Corolla car. I don't know. It attaches myself to something. And there's an effect that happens. I call the barakah effect, right? Where there's some kind of increase, some kind of benefit, some kind of growth, right? Or stability continue. There's some kind of effect that comes, which, and if you go further, it is hard to explain, right? This is where the part where it's like, it just doesn't make logical sense, right? So that's barakah. There's this incredible effect that goes above and beyond what we think is possible, basically, as well.
No, it's really great. I mean, it seems like, because I've known you for a long time now, so it's one of those things where, you're living it, right? Because you started off in one way, it's grown to be so much more. So, and because you had your mind focused on the right thing, there's barakah in it as well. So, it's grown because of that. And then it goes back to what you said earlier about the fact, the continuity.
Yes,
it's
I'll
there.
definitely say continuity. And I'll look back, if someone asks that question, the fact it continued would be my answer too as well.
No, it's really good. I do remember those blog days when we met back before 2015. So it's good. It's good to see where you've come. And hopefully they'll continue because I think we do need it. And I think for a lot of people, I think it's that balance they don't have. They really need that. Do you have any final thoughts, Mohammed?
Yeah, I'll just say that one of the things that as we enter this phase of, we've reached a point now where for the past 15, 20 years, we were testing these ideas, right? The barakah and halal investments and I feel we reached a point now where we need to be confident about these concepts and these sort of mindset, values, rituals, approaches to life that we need to start sharing with the world. I think sometimes as Muslims, we tend to be in our own little corner, this is how we do things. And we don't feel comfortable, feel maybe insecure about explaining how this stuff works and why it was beneficial. So I think we reached a point where whether it's finance, whether it's halal, investments, whether it's even halal foods, modest fashion, there's all different areas in the Islamic economy that people are entrepreneurs have been testing ideas the past 20 years at least. I think it's time for us to kind of be very confident and to share a different faith-based worldview that actually adds value to the world and can help solve one of the world's biggest challenges. And I hope that people take this as a mission for themselves. That's why we've actually shifted our mission to say it's not about just being the best version of yourself, but to be the best version of yourself, but make an impact in society. Don't just be, don't be in your own little corner and just feel like, okay, I'm good, I'm fine. We need to go beyond ourselves and offer the world what God has gifted us, basically.
Please consider an investment's objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. To obtain this and other important information about the Amana Funds in a current prospectus or summary prospectus, please visit amanafunds.com or call toll-free 1-800-728-8762. Please read the prospectus or summary prospectus carefully before investing. The Amana Funds are distributed by Saturna Brokerage Services, member FINRA and SIPC, and a wholly owned subsidiary of Saturna Capital, the investment advisor to the Amana Funds.
Investing involves risk, including the risk that you could lose money. The Amana funds restrict investments to those companies consistent with Islamic and sustainable principles, which limits opportunities and may affect performance. This material is for general information only and is not a research report or commentary on any investment products offered by Saturna Capital. This material should not be construed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy any security in any jurisdiction where such an offer or solicitation would be illegal. We do not provide tax, accounting, or legal advice to our clients, and all investors are advised to consult with their tax, accounting, or legal advisors regarding any potential investment. Investors should not assume that investments in the securities and/or sectors described were or will be profitable. This podcast is prepared based on information Saturna Capital deems reliable. However, Saturna Capital does not warrant the accuracy or completeness of the information. Investors should consult with a financial advisor prior to making an investment decision. The views and information discussed in this commentary are at a specific point in time, are subject to change, and may not reflect the views of the firm as a whole. All material presented in this publication, unless specifically indicated otherwise, is under copyright to Saturna. No part of this publication may be altered in any way, copied, or distributed without the prior express written permission of Saturna Capital.